How to change captions language. Cómo cambiar el idioma de los subtítulos. Click the settings icon. Haga clic en el icono de configuración. Click captions. Haga clic en subtítulos. Click on auto translate. Haga clic en traducir automáticamente. Choose language y elige idioma.
I'm Kim Gaddy. I'm the founder and executive director of the Southward Environmental Alliance. I'm a fourth generation Norker, so I have always lived in the South Ward. And as I was going through school, from elementary to high school, my teachers, they were very supportive of me, and they always told me, remember your community. Your community needs you, and don't forget your community, and come back to your community. So I went away to college with that in mind. I was always an activist. I came back, I got married. My first son was born in 1988. When he turned 1, he was diagnosed with asthma. I was working in municipal government for about 12 years as a chief of staff for 3 different council members. And I was also elected member of the Newark School Board. When I had my second child in 2000, she was diagnosed with asthma at 6 months. And I was out on maternity leave, and I was trying to figure out what, was I going to go back to municipal government or what I was going to do. When she was diagnosed with asthma, I said, something is happening here. I knew that I had asthma as a child. Asthma never leaves you. Your lungs just get stronger, and you learn how to manage that asthma. So I was very athletic. I played sports. So back then, that was something that helped me in my respiratory situation. And my asthma was connected to my allergies. So I would go to an asthma allergist, and I would have to get shots like once a month for my asthma. And so after my daughter was diagnosed, I just said, wait a minute, what is happening here? And I had already been exposed to environmental injustices in the city of Newark through lead in the drinking water. I was first elected to the Newark School Board in the early 90s. And back then, we had a lead issue in Newark Public Schools. Fast forward, I was reelected. And the same issue was lead in the drinking water, not only in the city, but also in the schools. And so it was from those 2 experiences, having a godson that was diagnosed with lead poisoning from lead paint chips and dust when I came home from college, and then having my second child be born with asthma, I said something has happened. So although it started off as a mission for me and fighting for my children's health, to make sure that the health injustices that Black and brown children in the city of Newark was experiencing wasn't just for my kid, it was for everybody's children. But it was selfish at first because it was my children that was being impacted. And then in 2004, I had my last child, and he was also diagnosed with asthma at 2. So I began to make these connections about the pollution that was in my community, the exposure that my children, was, the poor air quality and the environmental degradation that they was exposed to, because I would always take them to Weequahic Park. It was a park in our neighborhood. I lived in the Weequahic section. Weequahic Park is an Olmsted Park, just like Central Park in New York City. And everything you want is there. The largest rubberized track in the nation, in the Northeast, right? Then we had our baseball fields, kickball fields, softball, all these things that you are taking your kids to recreate and thinking that you are protecting them. And all the while, that area of the South Ward, Freeland Heights and Avenue, the Dayton Street neighborhood of the South Ward, was experiencing 4,000 trucks, diesel pollutant trucks, coming across Freeland Heights and Avenue within an hour. And so now my children, while they're having activity, their lungs is open to the highest degree. And so now you're being exposed to these toxins. And so I started working for Clean Water Action. I'm during that time after, like I said, my daughter was diagnosed. And so for 23 years, I worked for Clean Water Action as the environmental justice organizer and then the National Environmental Justice Director. And I left there in May because I had started the South Water Environmental Alliance 3 years prior, but we received our first funding in 2020. And so I decided that it was time for me to take all the knowledge and the organizing skills that I had learned with Clean Water Action and take it back to my community that I loved and where I was raising my children and my family within the South Ward of Newark. And so that's, the beginning of my story. No, it's kind of long, but I was trying to shorten it up. But unfortunately, when you think about the zip code that Black and brown individuals reside in, that's where the most toxic areas are located. It is directly connected to low income and Black and brown communities. If you follow those two criteria, wherever you see that, you're going to see some of the most polluted facilities. You're going to see the highest rates of asthma, premature deaths, because it's directly linked to race and income. And when you think about environmental justice and all the issues that surround environment, it has always been a fight about land. Who had the land, who had control of the land, had power. And so when you think about the valuable land that Newark and some of these urban communities actually have, and then you think about the industry, unfortunately, the industrial pass of Newark, because it was located right by the Passaic River, we had the largest amount of breweries in the country at one point because of the water and how pristine our water was and how it mixed with the beads and beer. So you had all these beer factories. Then you had all these paint companies, right? All these polluting facilities that was connected to water, right? And so they didn't know at the time that all of these pollutants that you was now using to make paint, that you was using, for factories and companies, will now become toxic, very toxic. And now you begin to bury it within the land. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is now we had a community that was dumped on and left abandoned by these polluting facilities, and so it left us with Superfund sites. For example, in the South Ward on Freeland Heights and Avenue, the Diamond Alkali Superfund site, right across from Weequay Park, the area that I was talking to you about, right, had one of the largest, it's the white chemical. Diamond Alkaline is in the Ironbound. It was the white chemical Superfund site, which is right there on Freeland Heights and Avenue. And what happened is they buried toxic drums in the ground, and so it contaminated the water. And so when you think about that contamination then was spreading to the homes in the Dayton Street neighborhood. But all of it is about land and utilizing communities where Black and brown individuals reside as sacrifice zones, and thinking that their life is not worthy, like some of the more affluent communities. Mm-hmm. And so they dump the most toxic facilities, they site the most toxic facilities. Then the cumulative impacts of pollution begins to kill that community, and they can't escape. And we are fighting because once you know better, you got to do better. Mm-hmm. We can't continue to talk about what you didn't know in the past, but what we know in the future is Superfund sites, cumulative impacts of pollution are disproportionately killing Black and brown individuals in the South Ward of Newark, New Jersey. So the Superfund sites are sites that are some of the most contaminated sites in the country. Some folks know about brownfield sites, right? Brownfield sites might be a former gas station, right, where you had a gas pump that went out of commission and there was some small level of contamination. But a Superfund site is now a larger land that has been contaminated with multiple sources. It could be from just water, it could be from contaminants in the air, it could be, and is on the EPA register of toxic sites, right? Brownfields you will see at a local level, at a state level. But these are sites that have been so polluted that the EPA has said you cannot build, and or expose humans to these facilities because of the toxicity that's seeped into the ground and the land. So that's how I try to, when we educate our community, we try to inform them in a way that is digestible and that they can understand, right? And so that's how we kind of let individuals understand that Superfund site is some of the worst sites where the land has been totally contaminated, and it was put on a national federal list of places that have toxicity in the air, water, and there's always been funding to clean up Superfund sites. But the reality is that some Superfund sites get cleaned up to what we call commercial standing, and some get cleaned up to residential standing. So if you clean up a Superfund site to commercial standing, you still can have some toxicity and level of pollution. And what they will do is they will cap it, and they will say, hey, don't break this area or blacktop it. But hey, this is cleaned up a little bit better, so let's put the building over here. But what you tend to see is that you're not really protected when you have a Superfund site. There's examples throughout the state of New Jersey where they built schools on former Superfund sites. And you begin to see cancer outbreaks in young children, or you begin to see the schools beginning to seep, or the children and staff getting sick from fumes that are now seeping through the ground. And so there has to be a lot of, political will to really say, we understand that these are issues with Superfund sites, and nothing should be built on Superfund sites unless they are totally clean to residential standards. Totally. And the laws that's on the books is always being challenged and reversed, right? Every couple years, you have to have a champion. Our Senator Cory Booker for the state of New Jersey was one of those fighting to make sure, that we are protected from Superfund sites, that there's money for cleanups, because you are supposed to have meetings in the community, one, to make the community aware that there's a Superfund site. Two, there should be the ability for those residents to be trained up and potentially be employed, right, in part of that project, like train them up so now they can be a part of what the cleanup is. Then thirdly, you're supposed to have community outreach, really meaningful community outreach and dialogue about what the contaminants are. What did the cleanup consist of? What are the potential harms? What is the mitigation plan, right? These are all required in the federal law around Superfund sites. But often happens is individuals don't fulfill what the full process is. And so the people who are now harmed are those individuals who live in these communities, and they are never really giving all the information about how harmful these Superfund sites are. And so now you have individuals buying homes. If you think about Long Branch, New Jersey, the Newark housing Authority built public housing on a Superfund site. And one of my EJ champions, they began to, colleagues, they began to fight down in Long Branch because residents were dying from cancer. A cancer cluster was developed. So when you talk about why is that an issue, it's because people lack the political will to do right by folks. They know that they're not supposed to build, but the politicians, elected officials, the mayor, the local council people, say, hey, there's money out here, we could build. This land, look all of this land. That land's been sitting there for a reason. It's contaminated. And so don't cut the corners, clean it up. Clean it up all the way. I just think about another EJ colleague, Chief Mann, and up in Wanacue, they have the Indian land that they had. Ford dumped barrels and barrels of illegal oils and substances, and their whole clan of indigenous people is being wiped out because of those toxic pollution from a Superfund site that Ford Motor Company was responsible for. And yeah, they were cited. They was, and said, hey, you have to clean this up. But where was the real enforcement? And you catch it 10 and 15 years later when what? The damage and harm is already done. So we need to err on the side of precaution. We need to not develop on any Superfund site until we are sure, 100% sure, that there's no contamination, because you can't bring those lives back. So the South Ward Environmental Alliance is a nonprofit organization that is working to build environmental justice in all 3 neighborhoods of the South Ward. So we have 80,000 residents in 3 distinct neighborhoods: Weequahic, Dayton Street, and Clinton Hill. And how we empower our residents is by the principles of environmental justice. We truly believe that our residents have to have a seat at the table and meaningful participation in the narrative of how their community needs to be developed, right, and what it should look like. They are the local experts. We don't need any outsiders coming in dictating to us to tell us what our neighborhood should look like, right? How we should be living, what buildings or new construction should be built. No, that should happen with the community, from bottom up, not top down. And so one of the projects that we focus on is NOFAD, Norcas Organized for Accountable Development. And we're connecting the development projects that are happening in our community by empowering residents to understand what is the function of a zoning board, what is the function of a planning board, what does the master plan mean, how can I speak at these zoning board meetings to ensure that the development that's coming into my community has trees, that they're energy efficient, that they have electric stoves, that they have greenery, right? That they now have EV plug-ups. We have to be able to have these conversations with developers and our elected leadership. And so at the South Ward Environmental Alliance, we created 4 advisory council boards. So we have a youth advisory council because we understand that our youth are the future. They have to be a part of the decisions that will happen in their community because they're present now. It's not about tomorrow, it's what is happening now. So we have to train them up and teach them how to be the future EJ activists. And then we also have a senior citizen advisory council because we know the elders have been there. They know the stories. They can connect to our youth with that intergenerational connection of this is how it used to be. And the youth could say, but what about this now? So that you could come up with solutions that not only work for the elderly and the senior citizen population, but also the youth. And at the same time, there is mentoring going on and growth, right? Then we have an air quality advisory council, because we have purple air monitors and black carbon monitors. We do truck counts. So we want to make sure that our residents sit on these advisory councils and say, hey, there's some hot spots right over here. Every time I go to catch a bus, I see 30 trucks in this area. Oh, look, this is some other areas that need to be addressed, right? So now you're hearing it from those individuals who live in the community and who experience the impacts, right? And then we have a ports advisory council, because we are the backyard to the second largest port in the United States. In one day, 25 to 30,000 trucks come in and out of that port. It is the economic engine for the tri-state region, but is the diesel death zone for folks who live in the city of Newark, and specifically the South Ward, Elizabeth, Jersey City, Bayonne. All these communities are impacted by that truck traffic, right? And so we have to let people feel, I have the power to change what is happening. And so we truly believe that the voices of the community, they are the ones that we have to listen to. They are the ones who know the solutions. And so we allow them to be the center of what our projects are and how we plan on resolving the respective issues in the community. Because we understand that there's no one coming to save us, and that the individuals who will save us from the environmental degradation that we suffer from on a daily basis, from the health injustices that we suffer from, with 1 out of 4 children having asthma versus 1 out of 10 in the Essex County suburban rings. We're 10, 15 minutes from Livingston. The life expectancy, that can't happen. And so we provide the training and the leadership. And so we do that in a couple ways as well. We have the Green Alliance Leadership Academy, where we target specifically school-age children, elementary schools and high school. Then we have a Green Alliance Leadership Academy for residents. And then we have a Green Alliance Leadership Academy for businesses, because we understand we want a thriving, vibrant, healthy community where our quality of life can be improved. And we can't do that without all the stakeholders having a seat at the table and understanding that businesses have a responsibility as well as residents. And when you think about the whole city of Newark, with probably 80% is rental, we have to have these conversations, because you have a lot of individuals who are renting. They don't own the property, so they have to be empowered to be able to challenge and have the right kind of conversations with their respective landlords or LLCs. And so that's why it's truly important. And we base this on the Ahmed's principles of democratic organizing, from a bottom-up approach, right? And also the 17 principles of environmental justice. And then lastly, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. And one of the ones that I always tell to our community is Kujijakalia, which is self-determination. You have the right and the self-determination to make sure what you want in your community is what you receive. And so we let them know the power is vested in you. It's not vested in the individuals that you elect and hold in trust. The power is vested with the people. But in order for you to execute and realize your power, you got to be informed. You have to be engaged. You got to participate, right? And so through our respective councils, we engage, we empower, we train, so that now this is not just about a legacy or an organization that I created. It's about environmental legacy that will go on beyond me, and that our community will continue to have environmental justice, because we know that environmental justice is a civil rights issue. We're humans, and as humans, we should have access to clean air to breathe, safe, affordable drinking water to drink, and access to food. And if they don't engage themselves in these processes, those things that you deserve as a human will be taken away. the 23 years that I work with Clean Water Action. They are a partner. They're a big green, so they can't speak for us, but they can definitely collaborate with us. I am one of the founding members of New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, so we actually partner with them, and we are all in a coalition together. Ironbound Community Corp, which is our sister organization in the Ironbound, and who have been around. SWEA has been around for, it'll be 5 years this year, and these organizations have been around longer. And then we have community-based organizations. So just within the South Ward, we have our South Ward Improvement District, right? Because again, as I said, we have to have our businesses plugged in. We have the South Ward Promise Neighborhood, because I'm connecting all of these social service organizations, civil rights organizations to this issue, because our environment is everywhere and it's inclusive of everything. And so I bring in all of these different organizations. Our Newark chapter of the NAACP, we partner with them. We establish an environmental justice subcommittee. Clinton Hill Community Action, which is a community-based organization that deals with housing. So we want to make sure we have housing. We engage with our schools because our children spend most of the times in these schools, and they don't understand that the air quality, indoor air quality in their classroom and or the cleaning products can impact their asthma and their health. So we have to engage with our Newark public schools. And then we have block associations, district leaders, right? We have the South Ward Police Precinct Group, because they're concerned about safety. And when you think about thousands of trucks coming down a main street, we need some safety for our seniors. We need safety for just our youth, right? And so it's very, very important that we not only partner with like-minded environmental justice groups, but community-based groups. And then I would say lastly, our faith-based groups, because we have to include our clergy as well, because so many people are inside the churches and we have to let them know what's happening. So we don't leave anybody out. We make sure that it's a whole village that must be involved to save us. Well, I would say the first one is the lack of political will. You know, it took us 12 years to get the strongest environmental justice cumulative impacts law passed in the nation under our Governor Murphy. And to take 12 years for somebody to support an initiative that should have happened in one day, to me, is a lot. And so I thank Senator Singleton for carrying that torch along with our governor. But we have to have more champions like that. There's a disconnect between our elected leadership that represent Black and brown communities, because they think that the environment is over there, or, well, the crime in my community, you know, they need jobs, the healthcare. And I say, everything you just listed starts at the core from environment. If you create an environment that's healthy, right? If you create an environment that provides jobs that are not harming the workers, you won't have a healthcare crisis to the degree that you do. If you begin to focus on educating your community around the environmental injustices, now you can have individuals coming through your school system who are informed and empowered, but they look at all these other issues as priorities. And so the environment sometimes seems to be left and forgotten about. And so that's a serious obstacle. It took me, I never forget, just when Cory Booker was our mayor, it took me 3 years to really get him to understand what environmental justice was. Now you still have people talk about it, but they really don't know what it is. Then another obstacle is you have these big green organizations that are now saying we're doing environmental justice work, so they grab up all the funding, right? and they have a larger network so they could come and try to speak for the community. That's a serious obstacle. We have been working until it's gotten a little bit better, but that's an issue that in the 23 years that I've been in this space, it's a constant challenge. And then I would also say that one of the obstacles is making sure we can appreciate the residents. And so we tend to provide stipends. And it's not just saying we have to pay them to come to a meeting, to come to a training, but we need to offer them a stipend because their time. When you think about individuals, they might have to pay for a babysitter. And so that is sometimes an obstacle when we're going after funding, because if you put stipends into a grant, it's like, it's looked at like, oh, you need stipends for. But if we really want community to have a seat at the table, they should be afforded stipends. And equal to almost when we have the colleges come to us and they pay all their scientists. I say, well, this is my community scientist. This is my expert. And so that is an obstacle on how we can get our funders to really see the importance of making sure that there is funding for residents so that they can really have a seat at the table and a participatory role in the outcome. And then I think lastly, although I as an individual have done so much in this space, being a founder of a newer organization, I'm grateful of the relationships that I've had, so that helped me with funding. But you have these other individuals who might have been around 35 years, 40 years, that have access to larger pots of funding based on, their work. And some of them do some great work. But where is the room for the emerging groups that are coming up, right? That deserve the same kind of support as some of these other organizations. But it's almost like you have to compete, and we shouldn't have to compete against other groups. The table should be open and the seat should be there for everybody. But that's a major obstacle, me kind of balancing. Why am I competing with people that you want me to collaborate with, or what? It's an obstacle, but I'm working through it. I think what's important when we say we want community representation and community to be a part, we have to also recognize that we have to meet community where they are. And so if there's a group of parents that want to be engaged, and I'm talking about asthma, and I'm talking about training and truck counts, I say, okay, well, when is your PTA meeting? Let me come to your PTA meeting because you're going to be here at the school anyway. Let's have a conversation on how we can connect this information with the parents right here. So now they don't have to take another hour or two. But then we also provide a stipend for them because we do know that it's some extra time. They might not be able to get home and cook dinner. They might have to stop somewhere and just pick up some food. And so it's not so much about saying we have to pay individuals to have a seat at the table. It's more so just appreciating that individual that's taking out that extra time, right? To say, out of all these things, this is also important to me. And I appreciate that I'm at least getting some support and that somebody understands, because I think where our community feels the most, where they're most left out is that lack of understanding of, I do have other children or I do have other obligations, and that in order for me to participate, I just want to make sure I have some balance on these other things. And so it shouldn't be a either or and a decision that they have to make. And so we balance it through the stipends, but also meeting that individual where they are, so we can say, we'll come to the school. You plan on having a meeting at a school? When? How many parents? So we try to be as flexible so that everybody can participate. And oftentimes that also means that sometimes we have meetings during the day for our senior and elderly population, individuals who work in the evenings. And then we have also meetings in the evening for those individuals who work during the day, because that is also a way where we constantly leave people out, is because we are having meetings at a time that is not conducive to the community. And so, and then I would just also want to say, and that's why we also provide food and refreshments, so that if they are coming to an evening meeting, so now you don't have to worry about, I gotta run home and cook. No, bring your children to the meeting. It's a children-friendly meeting. And we try to have some activities for the children as well. So we try to make it as holistic as possible, so that people really feel that, they are concerned about my needs and why I need to be here. And so I think that's important too. So it gives that balance, I believe. What our role is at Southward Environmental Alliance, not only changing training up the next generation of environmental advocates and leaders, but it's also exposing residents to the emerging green jobs economy. And so we are truly concerned about making sure those who are most impacted by the pollution are the first to be in line for the jobs in the new emerging green economy. And so we are training up individuals so they don't have to get ready. They're going to be prepared. And that's important because we want to ensure that we are not dependent upon the fossil fuel industry, and that we have to look at what renewable energy means. And so we have to train up our community to be solar installers, to understand what wind power is, to utilize green infrastructure. Like, we have to make sure that they are capable, qualified, and can fulfill those jobs. And I think there's not enough conversation in the Black and Brown communities to really train up individuals for the emerging green economy. And so we are prioritizing that. And we're glad that we're able to do that because we know that residents are qualified and they want to do it. You can locate the Southward Environmental Alliance by visiting our office at 1067 and a half Bergen Street, Newark, New Jersey, or by calling us at 862-658-9573, or by sending an email to SWEA, SWEA, at southwardea.com. So that's SWEA, SWEA, at SOUTHWARDEA.com. Thank you.